Welcome to the Sharpe Way Show. It's the Sharpe Club, a little bit past 9 p.m. on the East Coast. You're saying to yourself, Larry, wait a minute, it's late. You don't usually do shows this late. I know, but Monday's always a special night for me. My caretaker, Charla, allows me to stay up past 9. She's good to me then. She lets me stay up past 9, and then she puts me to bed later. And if I don't do it, she yells at me. So I'm going to be good, and I get to stay up a little bit past 9 today. So I'm happy to have everybody here this evening. And this evening, we are talking about a very interesting concept, an issue, and that is education in America today. And when I put this idea together, we weren't having people like camping out on college campuses when I put this idea together. So bonus, I guess. So we've got a bonus idea. We can talk about what's happening on college campuses too. We can talk about the value of K through 12, talk about the value of college in general. Should we even be going to college anymore? Maybe not. Should we be homeschooling? I did a little bit of that. Maybe I'm the crazy one for that too. And I brought together a star-studded panel this evening. Woman who I adore. I've met her more than once. I actually interviewed her on my on the website before. She is what do I call her? She's an educator, maybe a writer. I'm not sure. She does lots of cool things. She'll tell you, the woman herself, Hannah Frankman. How are you, Hannah?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. And we have someone who was literally camping out at one of the places, who has literally had to have some professional problems because of his viewpoints. I'm sure he'll tell us that. The man himself, Professor Danny Shaw. How are you, sir?
How you doing, Larry and Hannah? Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And our returning champion, someone we have not seen on this channel for like months because she doesn't love me anymore. But now I have convinced her to finally come back. It was a bribe. It was cash. I finally got her to come back. The one and only, the educator, the scientist, the doctor herself, Charla Burnett. How are you?
I'm doing well, Larry. I'm happy to be here.
It's very good to see you. And guys, if you want to follow these people, please feel free. You can follow Hannah on Twitter at Hannah Frankman. You can follow Professor Danny on Twitter at Prof. P-O-R-F, Danny Shaw. And on Instagram, you can follow Charla at Venture Novelist. So let me go to the most controversial piece off the bat. Danny, you were fighting the good fight, I guess, in Colombia. You didn't get arrested yet? I don't know what happened. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so I've been teaching at John Jay College of Criminal Justice for 18 years in the Latin American and Latinx Studies department. And last month I was fired. I can go into that. There was a whole campaign against me because of my involvement outside of John Jay in this protest movement to stop the violence on Gaza, violence that I would describe as a general, I don't want to mess up your algorithm side.
Yeah, you're gonna get me canceled.
Yeah, Larry, I don't want you to end up like me, because then we'll be two unemployed individuals.
We'll both be broke. We can't have that.
We can't have that. So I went back to
let me ask this question. So they saw you outside. Were you and if you can't say anything, I don't want to get you in trouble. But were you invoking John Jay in your conversations? Were you doing that?
No. It was through Twitter and Instagram, and all of a sudden there was this doxing campaign against me. But when you get doxed, you get hundreds of thousands of threats. The most common threat is UNAZI. We're going to get you fired.
Of course, always.
Death threats as well. And then my alma mater is Columbia. I was a student leader there in the 90s with the ethnic studies struggles. I also did my graduate work at the School of International and Public Affairs. So for me to be camped out on the East Lawn and the Butler Lawn at Columbia was the most natural thing. I'm super proud of this generation of student activists. So, I'll begin by saying that.
So then let me ask you, see, my worry about this, and let me be the foil. This will make Charla angry at me, but that's okay. I'm talking to her in a while. She'll get mad at me. It's fine. So what about the idea that people always say, I don't want to send my kid to college because if I send my kid to college, you're just going to make him an activist. That's what you're going to do. You people are going to brainwash my kid and turn him into an activist. Well, if I see this camp out, don't I as a parent start going, man, maybe those guys were right. Isn't this a problem? Oh, you can yell at me now.
You want me to start with that one? I mean, I come from an
No, I wanted Charlotte to yell at me. That's what I wanted her to do. I think she doesn't agree with that. But
Claire,
no, you get my point, though, right? You do get my point, right?
I mean, everybody's an activist. It just depends what you're passionate about, right? And how far you're willing to go to make change. But I think whether you're on the far left or the far right, you still hit the streets, right?
I think most people are not activists. I think the vast majority of people don't want to step up, which is why this is such a big deal. I think most people don't. I think most professors are not going to do what Denny did. I think most can say, let me go back and shut up. I'm going to go teach my class. I'm going to get paid. I think most are not activists. I don't think most are at all.
I agree with
people, same thing.
I agree with Larry. I mean, in my department in Latin American and Latinx studies, my colleagues have not said a word. Few private DMs, but they don't want to get fired. They don't want to be associated with me right now. And that hurt me. I've worked with them for two decades. I'm not taking it personally. I know there's an incredible media blitz against Palestine. I think it's one-sided media coverage. I have no regrets about what I did. That's the way, my mother raised me. I don't think being an activist is a bad thing, but I agree with, I don't know who said it, but most of us are not activists, whether it's students or faculty, we're not activists. We're the antithesis of activists.
I think it depends on the cause.
I think what I've seen is most people, and this is just my personal, I don't know that many of them. The times I've taught at colleges, I've been like as an extra, right? They bring me in as a guest instructor, right? And so I've done some time in these situations. And all the teachers that I met there, very few of them what I think are outspoken activists. I would think most just want to kind of write their book, right? That's kind of what they want to do. Most do. And the ones who are outspoken are the exceptions. I mean, Hannah, you're shaking your head. Yes. Are you like, is that because I'm right or because what?
I think you're right. But I want to backtrack for a second to what you said about parents being afraid of sending their kids to college because they're afraid that their kids are going to become activists.
I hear that a lot in the
too.
Libertarian world. Like there's no tomorrow, like every other parent, like it is a common issue in the Libertarian world. It's a big deal.
It's a common issue, and it's an issue because it happens. But I don't actually think it's college's fault. I think it starts way sooner. Not the activism, but the susceptibility to the activism begins way sooner. I think that it's a problem that goes all the way back to like preschool and kindergarten education, honestly. I think it's a well-founded point because it does happen. Kids go to college and they change because they're around.
I saw it my daughter in high school, right? My daughter, now she's 20. She's in college now. But when she was in high school, and my daughter doesn't want to be an activist. She wants to just go to college and get out. She's like what I'm talking. She didn't care about activism. She wants to go to college and get out. She's not a thing for her at all. But I saw it in high school. It's one of the reasons why I pulled her out. I homeschooled both my kids for a little bit of time. And one of the reasons why I pulled my oldest one out early is like she literally in high school, she had to do something that was activism or she couldn't graduate. That was part of her grade. I'm not joking. Like she had to do something activist. And I said, what are you going to do it on? And she goes, Dad, I can't do it on anything that you would want me to. I said, why? She goes, this is what she said. She goes, I'll fail. And this was a Manhattan high school. She said, I'll fail. I said, what do you mean? Well, the teachers tell us what we can do and what we can't do. And I said, I'm pulling you out of that school. And so my fear I saw happen. So I do worry about that. And that was high school. And now that she's in college, it's a similar situation.
I mean, most of my friends here in Lansing, Michigan, who are doing any type of activism never went to college. In fact, most of them are kind of rough around the edges, formerly homeless individuals who have very little to lose and are willing to put their body on the line. There has always been a tradition in the United States where students protest because Usually they don't have a career, they don't have a family, they're able to protest. They have a little less to lose than the everyday citizen. But I think anybody can, at any period of time, can get moved by something. All of a sudden your child comes out as being queer. Now it's your mantle. Your child who has a disability gets taken advantage of by a doctor, and now you're, a medical malpractice activism. We live in a world in which we have all this information about all of these global pressures, whether it's climate change, war, famine, and it's not necessarily being at a university where you get that information. You can see it on the news, you can see it on the internet. And so people are now becoming fanatical about all kinds of things, whether it's the earth being flat or it's,
It's not.
children being massacred in Gaza. So I don't think it's necessarily has anything to do with the university per se. It just has been that when we're faced with tragedy where we really should be taking action, it's them who are able to do so.
I don't know if I agree with that. Can I push back just a little bit? And you guys are please push back on me if you think I'm wrong. Yeah, but I think some of it's cultural too inside of an institution, because I don't think the level of activism inside of different universities is not all created equal. And I think some of it comes down to the culture. I think that, well,
it's funny you say that, because, when I spent some time, again, doing some classes at Columbia and some at Yale, both at the graduate level, both at the business school. And when I remember Columbia, everybody in my class, my business school, all wanted to go into finance. Like they were all like Wall Streeters. Every one of them was Wall Streeters. Maybe like 10% weren't, maybe, right? And I did veteran work at John Jay. They almost all wanted to go, obviously, to become cops or law enforcement, something like that. Obviously, John Jay, big on that. And when I was at Yale, Yale was the most open. Yale, there were people who wanted to go into marketing. They wanted to go into politics. They wanted to go into nonprofit. They wanted to go everywhere. So for me to see Columbia more active than Yale blows my mind, because I always thought Yale's culture would be more that way. I was at Columbia. These are the kids who all want to go to Wall Street. They don't care about Gaza. They want to finance the war.
Business,
they don't want to, right?
I don't think the business school is the most conservative, certainly. But I was at the School of International and Public Affairs at SEPA, and then I was at Columbia undergrad. Probably the undergrad is the most activist oriented. I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, and from a young age, my dream was Columbia. I thought Columbia was still like 1968, and it was either Columbia or Berkeley for me. That was my orientation. And it's interesting to see Columbia, the epicenter again of student activism. Columbia has inspired the world. I was in an interview last night in Bolivia and Argentina. They're talking about starting encampments. We see encampments in Australia, Italy. We've seen the University of Texas, Michigan, across this country. There's now hundreds of encampments. So I can't help but be proud of my alma mater in this case.
Let me grab a couple of super chats if I could. Fahim, you just love me, so thank you so much. Thank you for the $9.99. Not even a comment, just here's some money. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Sam has a comment. Sam was a teacher. He says, I resisted indoctrination in college to become a 7 through 12 grade teacher. They ended up struggle sessioning me. I refused to change my position. I have heard from many teachers as I cross New York State, he's in New York also, that teachers in New York State, they leave all the time. And when I ask why, they always say the same thing: bureaucracy, culture, bureaucracy. That's why they leave. And they make a system to where the best teachers either stop becoming teachers. They either become administrators, so not teach anymore, or they leave because they don't want to be an administrator. How New York State runs, I don't know about other states. The average teacher in New York State, it's a good job. The average teacher in New York State makes between $70 and $80K a year. It's a living wage. Look, they're not buying a second house, but it's a living wage. I know some states teaching is not a living wage. In New York State, it is a living wage being teacher, but an administrator, it's like two or three times. I mean, the average administrator in New York State makes over $150K, like double what a teacher makes. So there are administrators in New York State who make $400K a year. I'm not joking. That's $400K a year to be an administrator. Why would you be a teacher? Why? When I could I'll push paper. I won't touch kids anymore. I'll just push paper and I'll make 3 times as much. So I do see that part coming here, and I feel like a lot of parents don't like that either because there's so many administrators and no teachers, and it makes them upset also. That's one thing I don't know. Is that similar in college? Again, I'm an outsider in college, so I don't know if that works that way. Dr. Danny, is that working that way?
It depends. I mean, college is a two-tiered system. If you're full-time, if you're tenured, you're balling. You're in the 150,000 range, really no complaints. But if you're like myself for the past 2 decades, it's very difficult, perhaps because of my ideological persuasion. But when they have you as part-time, it's basically $4,000 per course. It's chump change. It would be the same as being at Target or Walmart. And that's not hyperbole. That is concrete. It's an insult that so many of us college professors are so underpaid. And people often stereotype us and say, well, look at these privileged college professors. Who are they to take this or that stance? And they don't know our actual concrete reality. So I think it's offensive how we're paid. And that would never happen in the public schools in New York City. Public school teachers, for the most part, have very good benefits. We just got insurance a few years back. I went over a decade without insurance as a college instructor.
It's true. The public school teachers in New York State are, again, they're not wealthy, but they get a living wage. It's a good job to have to be a teacher in New York State. It's not a bad job. It's a decent job. You make a living wage and you get benefits. So it's a decent job. Absolutely. I totally get that. I don't know, but Hannah, you would rather us, I'm sure, spend more time homeschooled, more time in alternative schools, more time doing alternatives. Am I right?
Yeah, I think any family please continue.
No, but then if we do that, isn't the pushback always the same? If I homeschool my kid, if I put my kid into a private school, if I pull my kid out of public school, 2 things. Aren't I hurting the public school, right? Which is going to be using maybe poor kids. So I'm hurting the poor kids. That's number 1. And number 2, how am I going to create my community? How are my kids going to have their community if they're sitting at home? Don't you get that pushback?
Oh, I get that all the time. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and these are...
You fighting on Twitter?
These are the most common comments that I get from people who are not regularly, for some reason, some posts I make crosses their radar. They're not familiar with they're not someone who's already following the homeschooling movement or the alternative school movement. And this is I get this every day. I'm going to talk about the socialization one first, because I think that's maybe the simpler question to answer. I was homeschooled from 1st grade all the way through 12th grade. So this is not just hyperbole. I'm speaking from my own experience. Almost every homeschooler I've ever met is better socialized than public school kids. Public school kids are so afraid of interacting with adults because they've only ever experienced adults as authority figures, and they've only ever experienced older kids as this removed thing in a different classroom or a different building. And homeschool kids spend their days around other adults all the time. They go out into the real world with their parents, and they're seeing adults at the library and at the grocery store and at the bank and other. It's
funny you say that, because I've seen literally, I'm a business consultant during my day. When I'm not doing this, I'm actually doing some work here or there. So when I do some work with businesses, what I am hearing is more people who are recruiters looking for homeschool kids. I'm not joking. That's a thing. They're like, oh, you homeschooled? Oh. And I've seen it. And this is only anecdotal. But I do know that businesses are looking for homeschool. That I know, that I've seen data on. That's true. But I've seen anecdotally college recruiters looking for homeschool kids. Same thing. The idea of a homeschool kid, since I think the lockdowns, has the image of a homeschool kid is changing, because they're doing so well on standardized testing. They're doing so well on some of these entries. They're good at interactions. They're good to interviews. I think you're right. The homeschool kid, the mindset is changing.
Yeah, they're better equipped for the needs of the real world. They're better equipped for college because they understand how to be self-directed in ways that kids that went through public school all the way to 12th grade, it kind of puts them through the ringer their freshman year of college, because they've always had bells and places that they have to be and attendance. And it's very clear cut what they have to do when. They don't really have to be autonomous in order to do well, except maybe being responsible about getting their homework done. And then they hit college and they have classes at weird times, and there's nobody there to wake them up in the morning and nobody to tell them how to balance their schedule. And all of a sudden they're kind of floundering to find their footing again. And, many of them do just fine, but it's tough. And homeschoolers have kind of been training in that since, I mean, honestly,
I homeschooled my youngest one for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I shoved her back into public school, she was ahead of everybody. She was like, and she wasn't, when I pulled her out, she was not. When I put her back in, she was. So I really, it did matter. But look, I'm also lucky in one regard, right? My wife stay-at-home mom, right? So when you've got stay-at-home mom, that makes things a whole lot easier. I would say stay-at-home spouse in general, right? Whoever is the teacher. But in this case, stay-at-home mom makes it easier. But what happens when it's just me and I don't have a stay-at-home spouse and I got a kid or two, right? Then maybe it's not so easy anymore, right? And I mean, is this something for the privileged to where now the poor kids are getting, so keep the poor kids in the school and then the cool privileged kids all get to have the cool homeschooling stuff?
No, none of the families that I grew up with homeschooling were privileged. Many of them were like cut down to one income because one parent wanted to stay home and homeschool, and they were driving old cars and living in smaller houses and like making very deliberate decisions because they valued the education of their children more than they valued a second car or a vacation or, whatever they wanted to be spending their money on. A lot of them, like I remember grandparents bringing their kids to homeschool classes because the mom was working, or there was one set of families, these two moms that were best friends, and they both had part-time jobs. Like both of their husbands were working full-time, like primary breadwinner, but both of the moms had part-time jobs because they couldn't get by with just one income. And so they would alternate their schedules so that one of them would have the kids when the other one was working. Families are doing, I know another homeschooling mom, her kids are both graduated now, but she found a job at a nonprofit where they let her bring her kids to work because she was a single homeschooling mom, and the nonprofit was like really pro homeschooling. Yeah.
Danny's now telling me that most of the college professors are broke. Charlotte's saying all her people she works with are broke. You're telling me all the people homeschooling are broke. Is anybody privileged around here? What's going on here? Like everybody's broke. No matter what we do, they're all broke. What? Maybe we should be protesting Gaza. Maybe we got to bring back Occupy Wall
Larry,
Street.
The stats: 1% of the population owns more than 50% of our wealth.
This is true. You're not lying. It's true. Well, maybe we got to bring back Occupy Wall Street. Maybe we got to do that instead. Maybe we're protesting. Danny, you protesting the wrong thing. You got to be protesting Occupy Wall Street.
It's all connected. They just sent $95 billion to Tel Aviv, Kiev, and Taiwan. I mean, that $95 billion could go. We could do so much here in the Bronx and
cure homelessness with that money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's ridiculous. $95 billion for more war, more the big G word side. It's ridiculous. I think it seems like there's a common consensus that could be invested in our communities and education.
100%.
Homeschooling is not something I was familiar with growing up, and my children, I certainly, checked in with them about their everyday school experiences and educated them at home when they came home. Mm-hmm. But I was afraid that they wouldn't have the socialization skills. Both me and my partner were out working, so we didn't have that possibility. But I don't discourage it.
Yeah, I think I would say a quite similar story. For me personally, there would be no way that my mom, as a single parent who, was often on welfare and food stamps, would have ever been able to homeschool us. So I do think that there is some dynamic of privilege, but not always. Most of the kids that I knew were homeschooled were like living out in the country. Parents didn't have a whole lot, but mom usually wanted to stay home. And I think that experience can really work. If you have sound-minded, supportive parents and not abusive parents or parents that are indoctrinated into cults and things like that, because that also is a way for people to get those kids out of the system and away from the public's eye so they can do whatever they want with them. But I think it can work and it can be greatly successful. And in regards to the socialization, I mean, I would say that our public schools are oftentimes one of the most violent places you could send your kids. Yes. And is also very traumatizing. I know for me, it was extremely traumatizing, and the school didn't do very much for bullying or for fighting. And so in regards to socialization, I think that public schools can often be a place where we are taught violence and taught to be capitalists in kind of the ruthless sense where, it's us versus them. It's about us getting the highest grades. It's about us getting into the highest university that we possibly can, and forget everything else and forget being nice to anyone. So I think that option should be protected always, particularly if we continue to start going down paths where public education is getting more and more integrated into religious doctrination. Having that option to be able to take your kids out of public school and teach them, something that's not being forced upon you, I think is a really important right that we have in the United States.
Really quickly on the privilege front, there are a couple other just like examples that I want to throw out there because I think they're really important parts of the conversation about that specifically, like access. One is there was a kid who went really viral on Twitter a couple of years ago. His name was Cole Summers. I don't know if he ever crossed any of your radars, but he was living in Utah. He was 14 years old, and he was building a Twitter presence because he'd just written an autobiography about being homeschooled and he wanted to promote it. So he got on Twitter.
He ended up having a piece, an autobiography at 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Barry Weiss published one of his pieces on her at the Free Press, which gave him a lot of publicity. We published a piece about him at the Foundation for Economic Education.
He looked bad.
His parents were both disabled. His mom was legally blind and his dad was a disabled veteran, and neither of them were like working. They were living basically on his dad's benefits as a disabled veteran, and they were living in basically a double wide in the desert of Utah, like one of the poorest parts of Utah.
Privileged.
And they were homeschooling their kids, and they had like no money for anything, but they had an internet connection. And this kid, Cole Summers, he wanted to know why other families had money and theirs didn't. And his dad's like, I really don't know. Like, you should probably Google it. This kid's like 6, and he goes on YouTube and he finds Warren Buffett. And that was the start of their homeschooling experience, was the kid wanted to know all about like how people make money on YouTube at 6 years old. And he was a very exceptional child.
Clearly.
But like they had no resources. There's like the epitome of having no resources, and they found a way to make it work because neither of his parents wanted to send their kids to public school. They knew that from the minute his mom was pregnant with their first. They're like, we're not doing that. We're gonna find a way. And there are a lot of families out there that do. Micro schools, the micro school movement is also exploding.
Oh,
which is,
yes. That's illegal in New York State, by the way.
Wait, it's completely illegal to have a micro school of any kind?
Yeah, no pods unless I think the rule is you can have, in New York State has some crazy rule, like you can have your kid and that's it. Like if you get any other kids, then it's like it becomes a school. You have to follow all the rules of a school, and it's like only your kids. You can't add anything else. So you better adopt a lot of kids or no.
Do you have to file as a private school? Because I know there are micro schools in New York.
Yeah.
You have to. Do you know what the legal process is?
Yeah, you ignore them and hope you don't get caught. That's the legal process. New York has so much going on that they just ignore it and hope you don't get caught. Generally speaking, if you homeschool your kid and you have to put all the papers in every quarter, you got to put your papers in all the time, right? If you do your papers, they tend to leave you alone. You did your papers, they're covered. They check their box, they're good. You don't put your papers in, someone's knocking on your door.
New York's a notoriously tough state in the homeschooling world. It's like always like California too is pretty rough. There's a few of them.
Yes. And the worst part is most New Yorkers, and we know this by polling, actually want school choice. But the teachers' unions is so strong in New York State that they force the assembly people to never even put on the ballot. Like they won't put on this ballot initiative. They won't ever change it, even though the people actually want more school choice. They're like, no. And that's why they hammer homeschool so much. So, and we lost 100,000 students. I forgot. We lost a bunch. It's like almost 3 million students in New York State. We lost like 100,000 during the lockdowns. Like, and they never came back. What happened? We don't know. They just went away. We have no idea.
Well, a lot of people are moving to states that have school choice options. Like people move. Like Arizona's the leader in the ESA world, the education scholarship accounts. Families move there to find Jenny Clark, who runs this organization called Love Your School that helps people find like what they have access to in Arizona and now in West Virginia too. I had her on my podcast a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about it. And she said she gets calls all the time from families that are looking to relocate or are relocating to Arizona because there are more education options. It's pretty crazy.
100%.
But in states that are freer, a lot of the micro schools are being operated and attended by families that are low income. Like it's not normally a privileged family thing.
Nobody's privileged. I'm privileged. Just me. I'm the only privileged guy out there. It's just me.
Charla brought up something that I find fascinating, and that's bullying. Both my sons are survivors of bad, like beyond bullying. The homophobia, that stuff is so sad that just because you dress different or your hair, who knows what. I mean, in the Bronx, it was brutal. It's the internalization of how much violence from around us. I wrote a year in review account of school shootings. There were over 675 school shootings and random shootings and mass shootings in the United States in 2023. So I wanted to get into the sociology. How do we understand why is this so inevitable? Why can we almost guarantee that in 2024 those school shootings and mass shootings will go up? I don't know if anyone remembers Bowling for Columbine. It could have been called Bullying for Columbine. The Michael Moore film, the documentary, did an excellent job looking at how our young people internalize, whether it's U.S. foreign policy, they solve every problem with some invasion of Panama, invasion
100%.
of Grenada, invasion of a country we've never even heard of.
Yep.
So I think we have to go deeper into, and I lead all these workshops across New York City, anti-bullying workshops, and now there's also cyberbullying is a separate workshop, and it's one of the most demanded workshops. Why? What are our children doing on video games? What are they watching on TV? What are they seeing on the internet? What music are they listening to? Why are they socialized to be bullies?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid point. And then I feel almost like we need something to be part of, and we'll be part of anything, right? And if, I can be part of people who yell at, Danny's kid, let's all get together and do that. That's our new mission of the day. We want to do the cool thing of the day. We're part of the cool kids club and he's not, so we can be cool. And I feel like that happens a lot. I feel almost like our youth are just lost. I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but maybe because I'm older, but when I was in high school, there was a movie. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie. It's an 80s movie called The Breakfast Club. And it basically is it's a movie that basically kind of shows like all the cliques within a high school, right? Like there's the preppy girl and the jock boy and a dirtbag guy and the loner girl, right? And they're all like stereotypes. But I felt like that was like the thing when I was growing up. People fell into cliques. And even if you weren't one of the cool kids, you still had your own clique of people who you were kind of together. I feel like that's not really the same today. It's like you've got to be part of the cool kids or you're not. Like everyone's striving to be with the cool kids, more like a Mean Girls, right? Then when I was younger, it was okay to be in your own clique. Like even though I wasn't part of the cool kids, I could still be the boss of my clique, right? So my clique wasn't the cool kids, but I could be a cool guy in my clique. Now I feel like, no, you got to be the cool guy. If you're not, we're going to bully you. To your point, Danny, we're going to get you on. It used to be when I left school, I could go home. And if I had a bully at school, it didn't matter because I was home. But to your point, Danny, that bully follows me. That bully follows me on Twitch, or that bully follows me on Discord, or that bully follows me on Twitter, or well, if I'm a kid, not that, but whatever the cool kids are on, TikTok, whatever, right? They follow you on those things. It's a good point. I don't know how we fix it. Charla, give me the answer. Come on, you're the scientist. Give me the answer. How do we fix it? Give me the 2-second solution to all our problems.
I mean, I think that one, as Danny pointed out, is kind of rooted in the way that we as a country act at the world stage as a bully. I mean, art imitates life, and our government, we're just imitating the things that we see on TV. We're the best country in the world, and we, have to go and free and give democracy, and our opinion is right and everyone else's opinion is wrong. And we've done this for generations now. And so when kids, go to school, they're getting bullied. They go home, they're getting bullied by their parents. I mean, I hope that, you all had supportive parents. I had a pretty supportive family despite some issues, but a lot of people don't. And their parents are experiencing trauma on a new level with the introduction of the opiate epidemic, the crack epidemic. Yep. I mean, we have kids whose parents either are not there anymore or they're literally being abused by their parents. So how do you break that cycle when the teachers can't intervene and be there as supportive as they can because they're overwhelmed, or they're not getting paid. It's nice that people are getting paid in the state of New York, but they're certainly not getting paid in the state of Michigan, because we're out here doing Uber and Grubhub just to survive for our teachers.
No, there's a lot of states that aren't as good as New York. I remember when I was on, this happened when people got mad. When I was on Joe Rogan in 2018, there was a battle between me and him about teachers and teachers unions. And in my head, he was thinking about teachers in general. I was thinking about teachers in New York. And he's like, well, what about the teachers? I'm like, what? I'm not in Kansas. Like Kansas, you're in trouble in Kansas. Like you need a second job. You're a teacher in Kansas. You're good in New York. You'll be fine. You're going to pay your rent. You'll be fine.
And the way that poverty kind of creates and pushes as a force driver for this kind of violence is a lot of times particularly for men who've always seen themselves as the breadwinner, when they can no longer be that breadwinner, they try to control something else. And that ends up becoming abusive children, abusive women, and women can do it too. I'm not just, pointing out the men on this, but there's this tendency that when we can't control things, that we try to find other ways to control. So we're sitting here, and a recent poll that came out the other day said like 56% of people said they went without eating to pay their rent. They went without vacations. We're slowly becoming more and more poor as a collective mass society. And we no longer have control over our lives. And so it really does continue to fuel this cycle of violence. And there isn't any one solution. It would have to be a very complex and holistic approach that I'm not really sure that our government would want to do.
Let me give you one, which I think is happening. There was, if any of you saw that South Park episode a couple months back, talking, and there's a joke during the episode that the richest guys in the country were handymen. It may have happened in the episode. The handyman were the richest guys. The handyman was like driving a Bugatti and had all the girls around him because everybody wanted a handyman because no one knew how to do anything. So the handyman was making all the money, right? He was the guy who was the richest guy in the entire country, right? Great joke. However, there was some truth to that. Like, we're finding people who are in the trades. The average American needs about $50,000 a year average to live a middle-class lifestyle in that area. The average American does not make that. The average American makes like 40 something or something like that. So it makes the average American makes less. So the average American makes less than what they need to be in middle class. But the average tradesman makes $88K. So the average tradesman, right, makes more. And I'll go one step further. The average American tradesman gets into the trade at the age of 30. And the average tradesman in New York State is in his 50s. That means we are throwing our kids away for 10 years trying to go to college, trying to do something else, trying to find themselves, when they should jump into trades at 18. And I've been saying this for 6 years, and now Gen Z data is coming up. Gen Z is starting to do it.
I think it really depends on the trade, right? So my mom is the safety director for the largest commercial contracting company in the state of Ohio. She sits on OSHA boards, and she started a nonprofit for suicide in construction. They have the number one suicide rate of any job in the United States. And it's often because they get hurt on the job, they start to have pain, their body degrades from hard physical labor over time. They prescribe medication, they get divorced at higher rates. They seek out other substances like alcohol to try to cope with dealing with divorce or dealing with the pain that they're in. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of support for them when they get to that point. We lack mental health support. We lack substance abuse treatment. And so we're really just leaving those people out in the cold. So, if you're an electrical worker or a plumber or a welder, those trades are, thriving, and you can certainly do those well into your old age without the same hazards. But I definitely don't want to portray this as like all trades are the answer to seeking out a salary. You have to be very, cognizant of what you're doing. So it's a trade.
Yeah. And some men aren't good at that, right? You don't want every, I mean, I shouldn't just say men, but it's a vast majority of men going to trades, but even women, whatever it is, not every person, I'll be better. But every person should go into their trades. Some people shouldn't. Some people should be lawyers and doctors and teachers. That's no worries. My worry is I think we're throwing everybody, theoretically, college is the place to be versus college might be the place to be. And it might not be the place to be. And I feel that we're starting to get there. The Gen Z starting to get there. They're starting to say, you know what? Maybe I should wait on college. Maybe it's not right away. I mean, I look at myself. I went to college, like 30 years ago. But when I went to college, it was after. Like I was 21 when I went to college, right? I went to the Marine Corps first. And then I went to college. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. Then I went to college. I know myself, I was not ready for college. I'd have been a terrible college student. I would have just sucked. I had no discipline. I was a knucklehead. And the Marine Corps put some actual discipline in me. So when I went to college, I actually could get through it. But I would have never gotten through it without the Marine Corps. I'd have just, like a bunch of my friends went to college, 6 years, 8 years, either didn't graduate or graduated 8 years later. And then were working like at, a bus stop or something, like sweeping. And they had a college degree, just didn't even care. So I thought a lot of and this is years ago. And I think a lot of that happens even now. I don't know. Danny, you're a professor. Should you be shoving your kids into college or no? You going to tell them not to go?
Well, as a professor, I continue to pay my student loans to Columbia and Citibank.
Me too, Danny.
I have that resentment I wanted to turn over to you three in the audience. Was it really worth it? I don't know. I came out owing something like $150,000. And I tried everything to get some student loan forgiveness, and Biden has been packaging it and pushing it. And it seems like he got some through, but then the Republicans pushed back and cut it off. So I've never got a dime in forgiveness. And I've been serving college students at the public at CUNY, City University of New York, for 2 decades. I mean, for me,
wow, that's insane.
I think the question is what type of education too, because I grew up with this.
Okay.
We all did, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And the most important thing is education. What type of education? A critical education, an anti-colonial education, an education in what? And that's why I put out this book, 365 Days of Resistance, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, because I wanted to do a deeper dive. How come so many of our young people, we have millions and millions of young people, forget college, they drop out of high school. And yes. I think that high school, especially for young Black students, Latino, immigrant, working class students, it can be very, very alienating. It's the same cookie cutter, memorize this, A, B, or C. And I had an alienating experience in high school. I inspired myself. I was very self-didactic. And I encourage all the young people watching, you have to be self-taught too. I think that's the main lesson from Malcolm X, from the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Whenever Audre Lorde has that amazing quote out of Brooklyn, the master is never going to give us the tools to dismantle the master's house. So regardless of where people are, question everything. That's what I encourage my students to do. And
I like that.
Primarily, and question our textbooks primarily. Start off in
I like that. So can someone purchase that book?
They can.
Where can they purchase that book? Please tell me, Danny. Where can they purchase
online?
That book?
They can find it. Barnes and Noble. Your favorite corporate sponsors have it.
There we go. The system is going to pay him some money. So buy his book. Let him pay off some of his debt, guys. Buy his damn book. Be good to him.
Plug, Larry.
Absolutely.
I can't remember if it was Pew or if it was Brookings, but they just released a study that 57% of newly college grads can't find a job 2 years out.
Yeah.
And obviously that's higher for students in the liberal arts. But I think that for lots of other countries, particularly in Europe, I'm unfamiliar with others, they study and you take a test much earlier and you decide your track path much earlier, which is problematic in many ways. But at the same time, a lot of that is based off of current economic assessments about how many students they will need to fit specific jobs. And we obviously have the technology and the analytical capacity now to understand and predict how many jobs we're going to need in the future and what industries. And why are we not thinking about scholarship distribution, aid distribution across those so that we can get students in the right positions to build a stronger economy?
I can tell you why.
Well, you tell us why, Larry.
I'm going to blame the government because that's what I always do. So yes, of course, I'm going to blame that is what I always do. Federal funds have decided to we're going to give you money for whatever you want. So what does that mean? What is the incentive for the college to give you a degree that has value? There is none, because you actually aren't the customer. The customer is the government. The government gives me my money. So my job is to just have some rules and give you a sheet of paper at the end of 4 years. If you show up and there's your sheet of paper, have a nice day. There's no repercussion whatsoever. I've always said the same thing. If you want college to give you good degrees, allow colleges to be just like car companies. Car companies self-finance your car, right? You don't go to a bank to get a loan from a car. The car company finances your car and they make their money on the back end, right? Well, let the college finance your education, because if they finance your education and you can't get a job, they're not getting paid. So they better make sure you get a damn job. Or they're not getting paid.
Reduce that inflation of that administration positions, right? Because like you said, I mean, the average adjunct teacher makes maybe $47,000 a year. You have a tenure professor. Some of them do make, you know, 100,000 to 150,000, but your deans of your colleges are making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. Some of our presidents are making over $1 million.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
And this is in public schools. I've only ever worked at public schools, and both times our presidents made multi-million dollars.
Yep, absolutely.
I have a new resentment.
Here we go.
I have a tendency to do that for people.
That's good.
In alternatives to the public education, the private education, like the university system, like the Lambda school, now called Bloom Tech, that blew up a few years ago, that was training people to become software engineers.
Yes.
That was like directly an alternative to taking the traditional college path, like go do this year-long program, learn coding skills, land a job at the end. Their payment model was an income share agreement. So they were getting paid when you got a job and you were getting paid.
Yes.
Which had all of the incentives correctly aligned, like whether or not income share agreements is a great model and whether or not that's like a wise decision for a student to make. Like that's a very different conversation. I have very mixed feelings about it, but it aligns incentives properly, where all of a sudden the company cares about whether or not they're delivering a good product, because that's where they're getting their financial gains. And that's how it should be. All of a sudden you're incentivized to pay your instructors more and to have more competitive instructing positions, because the quality of the instruction is what leads to the quality of skill in the graduate. Administrative positions don't translate nearly as well to how much your students are accomplishing in the workforce. And like, maybe you don't have as many of them because your margins are different, because you're thinking like a business.
Yeah. Let me grab a couple comments if I could. Oh, go ahead, Danny. Go ahead.
Just before the comments, when I lived in Brazil, a lot of Brazilians will graduate high school and then they'll travel the world for a year. Similar in Australia. And I think that's an irreplaceable education. I started a PhD program when I was very young, and I was hearing these professors. It was very dry and distant, and they were talking about social movements, and it was clear they had never lived it. Now I ended up moving to Haiti. I moved to the Dominican Republic. I spent a lot of time in Cuba, Venezuela. I lived in Brazil, and that's irreplaceable education. So education is not just 7:30 a.m. till 3 p.m. With detention and recess. There's other ways we can actually educate ourselves.
100%. My time in the Marine Corps is invaluable. I always say that when I left America, I learned about America when I was not in America, right? That's when I learned about America, right? Living in Japan, living in China, I visited Korea, I visited Hong Kong before it became Chinese. I visited the Philippines, right? These places made me rethink a lot about America. I completely agree. And then
Larry,
go ahead.
I want to ask you a question, Larry.
Go ahead.
Are the Koreans happy that they have 30,000 U.S. troops occupying their land?
Generally speaking, those who live close to Seoul, yes. Those who live close to bases, no. So those who have to live close to a base are not happy to have a base in their backyard. But those who live in Seoul, right on the border of of North Korea, they feel very warm and cozy. So the city dwellers of Seoul are happy. They don't have any problems at all with it. They like it. They like the Air Force Base. They like the Americans being around. But this is 30 years ago. This is back in the 80s and 90s, 40 years ago. But the people who were near the air bases and near the bases, they weren't happy. But there one part they did like. This is an interesting thing. Back in the day, Marines cannot be stationed in Korea. That was part of the deal, because Marines were the only ones who were having victories against the Chinese and North Koreans, the Incheon invasions, breaking the Pusan perimeter. The Marines were the ones who did all the offensives and were winning the war. So when they did the non-aggression pact, the armistice, no Marines can be stationed in Korea. So Marines can only come in for exercises. So when we come in for exercises every year, that we would actually pay, the government would actually pay all the farmers in the North so we could dig up all their areas, put fighting holes every place. And they loved it. They were like, oh, great, thanks for the cash. And it was during the winter, so they weren't making anything, they just made extra cash. So they liked the money, Danny. I guess that'd be one thing. The farmers liked the money and the city people felt good, but some people did not. Did I answer your question at least?
Yeah, I would throw in too how many, Korean casualties from 1950 to 52. I've seen estimates of 5 million Korean casualties, which to us in a U.S. audience, no one would ever question that. It's just called the Korean War, and the U.S. we're taught.
Yeah, but to be fair,
and that number is huge.
But to be fair, in that war, casualties on both sides are Korean, right? So it's not just one side took 5 million casualties, right? Both, and that is a civil war. So in both sides of that battle, both are so civilian deaths in the North and the South are both Korean. Military deaths on both sides are both Korean. It's not like one side inflicted 5 million deaths from the other. Both sides slaughtered each other.
U.S. bombardiers inflicted, many, many deaths. That's the point where I was going.
Absolutely. No. We remember, for those of you who don't know this, America hasn't won a war since 1945. And America has been at war since 1945 and hasn't declared war since 1943. So we've been at war and haven't declared war since 42. I think 42. We declared war on Germany's allies, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary in 1942. Quick interesting note, we never declared war on Finland. Even though Finland was a Nazi ally, we never declared war on Finland. We only declared war on Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. See, you guys learned something new today. This show gives you cool trivia. Look at that. We never declared war on Finland, even though they were a Nazi ally. We did not do that. So.
One thing that I wanted to piggyback off of what Danny said is I have to agree with you. I feel, and you said the same, Larry, is that I lived in France for 2 years while I was going to school. I lived in Liberia. I lived in Palestine. And I have to say that those experiences taught me more. And the people there challenged me more to think critically and outside the box and from the way that I was raised than at any other point. I don't want to discredit the faculty who challenged me and pushed me throughout university, because they really did also contribute to who I am today and the way that I think. But I do think taking that time to leave the country is a great experience for people in the United States. And unfortunately, the majority of people don't even have a passport.
Yeah.
Felons can't leave. So we really, the system tries to keep people contained and viewing
Correct.
things from a very specific way. And I think that public education, and this is not just in the United States, I think any kind of government sanctioned public education will always have some component of wanting to paint a specific narrative that meets their objectives. And that's the important part, I think, in something that's slightly distinguishable from public education, K through 12 versus in college, because it really is kind of the first time where individual faculty members can try to institute their own kind of perspectives and ask students to challenge those, ask students to think a little bit more critically, whereas in K through 12, there isn't that critical component. And I know there are teachers who are definitely trying to push the narrative one way or the other. But I think, as Danny said, for our students, it really is just trying to get them to think critically. Whether or not they agree with what I agree with, that's not the point. I just want you to be able to leave that room and argue your point thoroughly and intellectually and from a standard of empirical thought, rather than just repeat and regurgitate something that you've been taught, which is a tendency, again, K through 12, it's take the test, repeat.
But how, this is to Danny's point, how can I expect a student who maybe is 19, 18 in that area to come into my college and now do that when for 12 years they've been told, don't you dare think outside, don't color outside the line. No, the answer is A because I say it's A, not because it makes sense. Right. And I think it's hard. I mean, we should be having K through 12 thinking critically. Like, as a general rule, when I am obviously a very libertarian parent. So when my daughter would get in trouble in school, I know you're so shocked, Charla. So my daughter would get in trouble in school. I would always just say, do what you will. I don't care. And they'd say, well, it'll be on a permanent record. Nobody cares, man. Nobody cares about your permanent record. Remember one time this goes to your bullying point, Danny. It's a perfect example you talked about. My daughter was being bullied. And I taught my daughter, you were to fight back for the bully no matter what. If they physically bully you, if it is a girl, you would take your open hand and smash her in the nose and break her nose. If it is a boy, kick him in the balls. That's it. You hit a girl in the nose, you'll drop her. She won't fight you back. Hit a boy in the nose, he'll just punch you harder. So kick him in the balls, he'll drop. And she got it. She's like, yes. So some boy's bullying her. So she bullies him back. She scolds him. He gets upset. The bully gets upset, calls his mom. Mom calls the school, brings me in. I said, so the kid that you're getting mad at my daughter about, he's been punished for bullying before. Yes. So he's a known bully. Yes. So he was bullying my daughter. Yes. And she fought back. Yes, she can't do that. She can't fight back. We might have to suspend her. I said, really? He went, yeah. I said, suspend her. Do the whole week. I said, I'll take her out. I'll give her a party. It'll be amazing. He's like, what? I said, yeah, it's fine. Suspend her. I don't care. Well, it's a permanent record. I said, nobody cares. It's fine. Suspend her. Literally. And you know what he said? He goes, well, we're not going to suspend her this time. And what I learned was this guy's goal, this administrator's goal, wasn't to punish my daughter. This guy's goal was compliance. This guy's goal was compliance. And of course, he was administrator. The teachers, they weren't part of this. They were like, yeah, the teachers actually were happy because the boy was a bully and was making their class crappy. They were happy that my daughter put him in his place, right? They were happy. But the administrators couldn't do that. The administrators, they did that. So I know I'm going along on this, but my point is, as I pushed back, my daughter became a critical thinker by default. She's like, oh, I can just ignore these guys? Yeah, no, it's fine. Just go do your thing. It's totally fine. And I think you're totally right, Charlotte, but I think K through 12 does a bad job of that. And I think that's one of the reasons, there are many, why so many of our kids going to college struggle. The average kid, it takes them 6 years to graduate college now. It used to be 4. Now the average is 6. I think they struggle because of that.
There's a weird paradox where all of K-12 education is built around college preparedness, like college admissions. Like the entire education system is built around having a transcript in your 11th grade year that will get you admissions in a good college. Like that's all everybody cares about. But it's not actually built on college preparedness in an academic and intellectual sense.
Correct.
You go to college and you have no idea what to do. Most kids are not ready for college intellectually, and they're not
Correct.
ready for college in terms of career preparedness either. There's this strange pressure that we put on kids that by the time they turn 18, they're supposed to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives, which is incredibly unfair and not really developmentally appropriate for a lot of kids. Like most kids don't have enough understanding of the world to know where they fit into it yet. And so we're trying to push them into choosing a path that they're going to commit to for the rest of their lives. They're taking on tons of debt to prepare themselves for that career. And then they're trapped in it often because they have to pay off the loans that they took out. And I'm
gonna blame the government again. Watch me do it again to make Charlotte happy. I'm gonna blame the government again. It's because the government pays the schools based upon placement, their placement percentage. That's how they get their cash. So if the K through 12 schools have a high placement percentage, they get more cash. And if they get more cash, well, that's all I care about is my money. So I just want you to get into college. Once you're there, I don't care if you fail. I got my money. Good luck. And I think I thank you for allowing me to blame government twice in one show. Thank you. Whenever I do that, I'm always feeling good.
We put that pressure on the kids too. Like it matters more whether or not you got into a good college than whether or not you graduated. Right. Like people applaud Stanford dropouts. Like the San Francisco tech people made it cool. And now if you say you dropped out of Stanford, you're in like good company, even if you didn't.
I'm the cool kid now.
Company, you got into Stanford, and that's the thing that matters. It's like even the students to a large degree don't care whether or not they graduate. All the pressure is just on getting in.
Yes. Well, let me, if I could talk to my audience, guys, if you're watching this show, do me a favor. If you're liking it, click the like button. Click the like. But if you don't click the like button, what you are saying is you hate my daughter. I've spoken to her about her more than once. So if you don't click the like button, you hate my daughter. You're a horrible human being. So click the like button. Click the button that is like. Do so now. It is important. Please do so. Also, if you're watching on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, repost this, re-X this, retweet it, do the re-thing, do that. If you're watching on YouTube, you can, if you want to, super chat me if you want to. That's awesome. Love that. Everything goes right to the front. You can also, if you want to become a member, because you want me to do more of this and less of this working thing, then click that join button, $5 a month. Come on, I give you good stuff. It's worth $5. Do that. It's a lot of fun. But more importantly, please follow these lovely people who have given us so much time, being so good to us. Please follow Hannah on Twitter at Hannah Frankman. Please also follow Professor Danny at Prof. Danny Shaw on Twitter or X, and buy his book. It's a good book. Go buy it. And also, please follow Charla on Instagram at Venture Novelist. So let me grab, if I could, a couple of comments. Got a lot of comments here. I want to grab some of them if I could. Let's see here. Wow, so many of them. Let me just grab one or two of them. Maybe I'll grab more than one or two. So many of them. David says, administrators and teachers unions are the problem in the education system. I believe that, but not always for the reasons you think. In other words, I don't think administrators are bad people. I don't think that at all. I think the system changes how they have to judge success, and therefore they do so. And then teachers don't get to teach, and they get upset. And I'm going to go through New York, which I know. In New York, teachers jump through hoops to become teachers. They get all kind of special degrees. They get all kind of special licenses. They got to have special experience. I'm assuming other states are similar. I know that's in New York State. Then they go into a classroom to have an administrator tell them everything to do. Mm-hmm. Well, then why did I go to school and learn everything? And why did I jump through the hoops? If I'm going to walk into the classroom and I can't be a teacher, I got to do what the administrator says. If that's the case, don't make them get credentialed. Just hire high school graduates and then have the administrators control them like puppets. It's a whole lot easier, a lot cheaper, and people will be happier.
For public universities, the board of trustees is often appointed by the governor. Ooh. So this also, is controlled by the state for these larger public institutions. So even I was a union rep at a university. So I don't think that there's any intentional of like, let's grab all these kids' money and run, because we're not seeing that money. We're still struggling. And I would argue for some of the bigger cities where even if you're tenure and you're making $100,000, you can't live in the city you're commuting 3 hours just to get into school. You have to really love to be an educator to be an educator. And the only way you can become a higher level admin is if you play the game right, and that you're going to do and say and talk the way that you want, just like a politician. And that's essentially what it is. It's a politician. You messing up, Dad. You ain't playing the game. And that's the kind of how life works in general, right? If you're not going to, talk in the right way, if you're going to walk outside of these specific lines, you're going to be shut down and you're going to be punished, because that's not what they want. They're not looking for educated, critical thinkers who are going to be revolutionaries. They're looking for people to stay in line. Yeah. And unfortunately, when you think about it, it's been like this now for a couple of generations. Sure. If you think that changing a bureaucratic institution like a university is easy, even when it's not something that is like the system that's keeping it in place, you can barely change a department culture and policy. So now it becomes, what type of intervention would we need at this point? And it would have to actually, again, even though the government is causing this problem, it would only be the government that could provide a solution. So it's just, with what's going on with Larry, your campaign, and others who are in third-party candidates, just like showing how in the United States that the two-party system is trying to maintain power. This is a system that obviously they thrive in. Yes. And it's obviously benefiting their constituents, because we're not really their constituents at this point anymore. They have very specific constituents. This system that we're talking about in our education benefits them. Yes, absolutely agreed.
Can I jump in for just a second here?
Please.
Because there's one very important point that I want to make in response to this, which is that no one we're talking about is trapped inside of this system that sucks. And that is one of the points that I talk about the most, because this is so much of the work that I do is around helping parents and also teachers. I have a very large subset of my audience that are disgruntled teachers who are either already have left the system or are trying to get out. No one is stuck in it. The incentives are terrible.
Yes.
And, to Charla's point, if you love teaching and the system is very broken, but you feel like you can hopefully do some good inside of it, there's a strong desire to stay, even though the system sucks. But there are other ways to be a teacher. There are other ways to be an educator besides conceding to play the games of the very bureaucratic, very top heavy, very antiquated system that we've sort of inherited after many generations of meddling and good ideas that were often not very good ideas, and like well-meaning people that were not always and terribly well-meaning who were designing the system that we now have in place. You can leave. And
I'm with you, Hannah, but I got to be very forward.
Please.
Yes, you can, but it's not easy for several reasons. It's not easy in certain states like New York State where literally they will come after you. And I have a couple comments. I'll show you that. They'll actually come after you if you don't do the right thing. And it's also not always easy socially, right? Do I have, to Charlotte's point earlier, do I have a social, network that I can fall back on, right? When things happen, do I have that or not? And also, are my friends going to call me stupid? I'm not joking. When I pulled my daughter out of school, my friends were like, what's wrong with you? They thought I was, now I don't give a shit. That's me, but not everybody feels that way. Right. So it's difficult, particularly what if I rely upon these friends for something? What if they're part of my church group, or they're part of my local social club? And all of a sudden they're going to start thinking that I'm crazy because I pulled my kid out of school. It's, you're putting your kid into a cult or whatever they're going to say, right? That kind of stuff. So I think you're right. It's just, I feel like you're making it sound a whole lot easier than it actually is. It's
not easy.
Okay, good. Then we're on the same page then.
It's not easy, and it's highly dependent on circumstance. I mean, I grew up homeschooled all the way through. My parents are the type of people who are very comfortable going against the grain, and they don't really care what other people think. Like my grandparents on both sides were very apologetic when explaining to their friends that their grandkids over here were homeschooled. Like they would always kind of feel a need to like over explain it. They didn't approve. They didn't understand. Yes. My parents just didn't care. And I feel like
I didn't tell people.
Sorry?
My wife didn't tell people. Like she didn't bring it up. She didn't want to bring it up. She didn't want to have the conversation. Right? I was ready to go and yell it, but she didn't want to tell anybody. Yeah.
That's not uncommon. Then the climate's changing very rapidly, and that's a very new phenomenon post-COVID. I think some of the discomfort and social stigma evaporated during COVID because everybody had to have their kids home, like sort of like right. In a figurative sense, everyone was homeschooling for a little bit during COVID.
Right.
And it stopped being this, like, you're not an alien anymore. You're not from like Mars or some other solar system. If you have your kids at home all day, like everybody has a frame of reference for that now. The Overton window shifted.
Right. That's true.
But as dissatisfaction with the system across the board increases, it's easier and easier to find people who understand what you're feeling. And it's easier and easier to find a community of people to homeschool with. But when I say exit the system, I don't just mean homeschooling. Like I'm not a homeschool absolutist at all. I think that if you can homeschool and your kids have the personality for it, and you have the personality for it as a parent, then it's an amazing option. And it's like a very high level education. But I don't think that every family should be homeschooled by any means. But you
bring this up, and I see it in Western New York. If you go back 5 years ago, like nobody in New York State really homeschooled. I mean, some people did, but hardly ever. Now Western New York, everywhere. You're totally right. It's popped up everywhere. Yes.
Let me throw out maybe a unique critique or question about homeschooling coming from an anti-imperialist or leftist perspective. For me, I would see it like, you can escape the plantation, but if I escape the plantation, aren't I abandoning the other to follow that historical metaphor, the other enslaved people? So for me as a Maroon, I mean, I've always been a Maroon. I've always been, faithful to my Irish anti-colonial roots. If I was to abandon the school system and do the homeschooling thing, I would still want to interact with those other parents and the everyday people. Because if we're not there, and I'm raising my two sons critically, if they're not there, who pushes back on Thanksgiving? Who pushes back on Columbus Day and those types of things? So I hear the arguments y'all are making. I just wanted to push back with that a little bit.
No, I think it's a valid point. And I think, I'm sorry, guys, Charla.
we can't separate ourselves necessarily from the community that we're here and bonded with, because I slightly feel, the same in that way, Danny, is, a lot of times, and I think that through my life, it's come in waves. Sometimes I'm like, screw the system. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's pack our bags. Let's leave. Let's go to a deserted island and let's never talk to anyone again. We'll make our own homestead. I'll have my own cows and chickens. I have chickens, but all that stuff, right?
Oh my God, Charla.
All that
amazing.
Stuff.
Yes.
But at the same time, that just leaves this bubble for them. And if you're not shaking up that bubble, they're going to double down. They're not going to know anything from any other perspective if you're not there to bring up those other perspectives. And when that happens, then they get more radicalized. And eventually they will come back and find your homestead, because you'll be the one little raft floating in the middle of nowhere with no protection, because you never built that mass community.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, my partner always talks about that. We're gonna go get some land and we're just gonna live off the grid. And I'm like, I'll visit you, for the weekend. Monday through Friday, I'm in struggle. I can't abandon all these different struggles for Palestine, etc. So we laugh about that.
See, everybody's got some libertarian in them. They all do. You all got your streak in you. You all got your streak. I
discovered it tonight. I didn't even know it took you all. So thank you.
There we go. See, we all got a low streak. I knew you guys had a low streak in you. That's good. But don't I still want to escape the plantation, to your point, right? Don't I want to get off the plantation? In my perfect world, don't I kind of, want to be the person? Don't I want to be Harriet Tubman? Don't I want to escape the plantation and then come back and then get some more slaves out and get them back and then head back? Don't we all want to be Harriet Tubman? Don't we want to be that? I took my daughter to that movie. She's like, I want to be Harriet Tubman. We all do. It's not just you.
You know what General Harriet Tubman taught us, that she freed 1,000 slaves. She could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. So how do we be the people who say,
no, you got to say that one again. She freed 1,000 slaves.
General Harriet Tubman said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they knew they were slaves. So how do we provide that consciousness that, to quote Marvin Gaye, this is not living? I always ask my students, what percentage of your life has been survival and what percentage has been living? And most of my students in the Bronx, 90%, 99% survival, just trying to push through. When can you live? When can you prosper?
To your point about, not wanting to leave the plantation because you don't want to leave people behind, and I understand that deeply. You show people that they're slaves by ceasing to be a slave. You show people the contrast so that they can see that there is something to be freed from. And the difference between the plantation era and now is that we have so much less separation. We have, we're so vastly connected with our communities. Like if you're not seeing your community, your kids aren't in public school anymore and your kids aren't seeing their friends. You're not seeing your friends who are also parents of kids inside of that school. You're still seeing each other on social media every day. You're still seeing each other around the community every day. You're not disappeared 5 states to the north where you may never see your family and your friends again.
Right.
People may follow you. I don't know that it's always an abandonment to be the front runner of something. I think there's a really big difference. You might not be just leaving everybody behind. You might be the trendsetter inside of your community. You can't bank on that being the case, but I don't think that, I think there's a fair argument to make that in some ways you're helping the people around you too by saying, hey, this isn't what I want anymore. I'm going to do something different and I'm going to let you see that I'm doing something different, even though that's really scary.
You're trying to be the example. So Mike Voss brings up, he says, no, being an example of success does not mean you've abandoned anyone. Something. So yes. Also, by the way, Charla, you have hit a nerve. Patty's like, Charla, I'm with you. Let's go. So Patty's coming with you. You already got somebody. Yes. You already got somebody already. And not just that. Sam's coming too. He's like, Charla, you won't be alone if we all create our own homestead homes. That is the power of being independent. Also helps us give less food to the large oppressive government. So you're going to have some people with you. You're not going to be alone.
I run an intentional home. I have 3 houses on a corner block where I live with 8 to 12 other adults from all over the world, whether internally displaced here in the United States or refugees from abroad. So I've already started living the life that I want to see in the world. I have done it, but I haven't had to leave the community to do so, and I still participate actively in that community. For me personally, like my son's only 4. So I'm sure as he gets older, Larry, I'm going to experience a lot of the things that you've experienced. But I've been really lucky to have found a school. We have an international bachelorette program here in Lansing, Michigan. We only have 2 schools in the state that provide a second language immersion program. And he's learning Chinese Mandarin right now. And he's in one of the most diverse schools in the state. And I did that with intention. And I think that we can certainly live side by side and show people a different perspective. But then we also need those rebel rousers that actually embed themselves in the system and start making noise. And Danny, you're one of those people. And unfortunately, they cut the plug on you right now, but that's not going to be the end. You're going to get right back up and you're going to get in another school, a better school who supports you, and it's going to give you a voice. But this had to happen first, right? You had to see where you stood, and you had to see where your institution stood, and it didn't stand behind you, and it doesn't stand behind the people in Gaza and against, the massacres that are happening. So, but you will, and you probably don't even realize it yet, but you have started a movement probably back at your university of people who are angry on your behalf, and you just can't see that reverberation yet. It'll come back.
I agree.
My department, there's about 19 or 20 of us. Ironically, I'm the only non-Latino, but I lived in Cuba, lived in DR, had a lot of experience, and they were petrified. They didn't speak up. They didn't want to be the next ones to be on the chopping block. But other departments gravitated towards me. Another department's giving me an award for extraordinary professor, this and that. And it was interesting that the rabble rousers from each department, we all began to congregate. So it did start a movement. We now have the city college encampment. I mean, Columbia started it 13 days ago, and now there's hundreds of encampments across the country. We see riot police slamming.
It's across the world now.
In Atlanta, like, why are they slamming professors down? What if we're the criminals? Out at Columbia, when they raided last week, they have helicopters, NYPD helicopters.
They had snipers. They had snipers on buildings.
We couldn't sleep because of the noise of the helicopters. And some students.
You teachers are scary. So that's why they got snipers.
My 5 foot, 140-pound me. I'm so terrifying.
Yeah, I'm scared. I need a gun. I'm scared.
Like, what are our weapons of self-defense? Books,
pencils,
pencils. One of the students said to me, like, "Professor, we're a bunch of geeks. Why are they treating us like this?" And I just started cracking up. We're a bunch of geeks.
So let me go now to the piece that I recently started with, and we walked around a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff, but I want to go back to it though. And that is, what is the actual value now of education, right? Should kids be just heading off to college now, right? I've always had a thought process, right? You guys tell me if I'm wrong, that if you have a plan, meaning you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something, go to college. Makes total sense. You got a plan. You know what you want to do with your life. You want to be a teacher, whatever. You have a plan, and college is part of that plan. Awesome, go. Or 2, you can get into an Ivy League school or a school that has a good network. Like you go to the, even not Ivy League, you go to the academies, right? If you can go to Annapolis, right? If you get to go to West Point or some place that has a great networking ability, or wonderful also. Otherwise, why are you rushing off to college at 18? Why aren't you doing something else? Why aren't you either traveling or working or some combination until you figure out what the next step is? That's kind of where I think kids should be nowadays. If you're 18, that would be my advice to you. If you're 17, that would be, if you ask my advice, that would be my advice to you. Do you have a plan? No, don't go to college.
I think for me, I can't say whether or not my life would be anywhere near the same, but I personally think that college has saved my life. It got me out of a really bad place in a bad neighborhood. Most of my friends are dead or in jail. And I probably would have followed the same path. Not only did university help me to be a critical thinker, but actually student loans gave me access to travel. Student loans made me be able to go study abroad in France for 1.5 years, and I wouldn't have had that experience without Michigan State's amazing international study abroad program that allows you to take your financial aid and transfer it to a foreign institution of your choice, one of the only in the country. You know, had I not had that, I think you might have seen a very more conservative Charla than you currently have now. It helped me get through my master's degree, and it helped me conduct research in 3 countries. You know, those 3 countries further expanded that. Had I not, there's no way I ever would have been able to take a gap year.
To be forward with you, Charla, everything you said for you, I could have said the same for me with the Marine Corps.
Yeah, sure.
Everything you said, the same thing happened to me. Marine Corps saved my life. It allowed me to travel, taught me how to be a leader, taught me to be a better man, communication skills,
you also could have died.
Yes, I could have died. Sure.
Charla was holding a pen. You were holding a gun. So I don't know if it's true. Comparable. I always say whenever I show up in another country, I got my notepad and my pen. That's all I need.
Yep, and then my white helmet for the period of time I was with the UN. You know, I mean, I was out there, but I just took a different role.
Yeah, my helmet was camouflaged. It wasn't white. Mine was camouflaged. Yes,
I think mine was technically blue.
Yeah, probably blue. Yeah, I thought they'd do that. The UN does the blue helmet. That's right. Yeah, blue helmets.
Blue.
Yes, exactly right. So I don't know, is it worth? I mean, what about the look? Snork Y2K says took 10 years to pay my student debt, another 10 to pay my wife's. So
I've been paying it for 30 years. What's 10? He's complaining about.
I'll be paying it the rest of my life.
Me too. 10 is I envy. I forgot the name, but I envy you.
I have no student debt. Never have. Now I might have died, but so I sacrificed I sacrificed that for me to have no student debt. That's what I sacrificed because I have no debt. I got my college degree when I was in the Marine Corps. So mine was, I spent like, I don't know, years of blood. That's it. But that's it. No real money.
That's it. Nothing. Just nothing.
What are you gonna do?
Just a little PTSD. Nothing to worry about.
That's all. A little PTSD, TBI. What are you gonna do? Easy. So yes. Hannah, is it worth it?
No. Well, the knee-jerk reaction is no.
No.
The nuanced answer is, you know, to your point, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to do something that legally requires the licensing and a degree, then yes, that's, you know, if you're sure that's the path that you want, then yes, absolutely, it's going to pay for itself. I didn't go to college. I was homeschooled all the way through. I skipped college to go apprentice with entrepreneurs because I wanted to get into business. I never had any student debt. And I was, you know, by the time I was in what would have been my junior year of college, I was working full-time inside of a startup, helping to build a company, building portfolio experience that helped me land multiple jobs after, had a positive net worth, very specific to, you know, the path that I wanted to be on. But I graduated from high school in 2015 when it was like, this was before the slew of articles started to come out about whether or not a degree was worth the monetary investment. 2017, 2018, this conversation started to really pick up. In 2015,
Goldman Sachs been talking about it for years. They were saying, don't go to college. Goldman Sachs was saying it years ago. Yeah,
but it was you Google like, should I go to college? And everybody's just like, yes, you're going to ruin your life if you don't. It was scary not to. Right. But you know, so many of the, like to Charla's point earlier, you know, more college graduates than not anymore are either unemployed or dramatically underemployed, but also
underemployment is a big problem.
For anything that's skills training or career training, the world is changing so fast now, and the pace is just going to continue to accelerate, that anything that's career focused is not going to be, like, by the time you graduate with a degree, the things that you learned are already going to be outdated. Like, I run a marketing agency, and the things that we're doing like are different than what we were doing 6 months ago, a year ago, because the tools are changing and the platforms are changing.
Funny you say that. As I said, I consult with businesses during the day. That's my day job. And when it comes to tech companies now, I was saying this 10 years ago. It was a trend I already saw. If you have a master's degree, you're a no hire. You're a no hire.
for having a PhD.
Oh, no hire. You're no hire.
No hire. No
You're
hire
no hire.
anywhere.
Yes.
You don't talk to people. You're not a real person. You just know how to read books.
Correct. Yes, you're no hire. It's the opposite. And now even I think it's 4 states just last year removed their requirement for a college degree to hire people.
Actually, I think it's PBR just did a huge spread on. There's 10 companies that have just dropped their college requirements. Yep. PepsiCo, a bunch of them. And I think that that's great because I think a lot of skills are trained on the job. Like, unless you're getting a degree in like office management, like you probably actually aren't going to learn any of the practical life skills. And a lot of it is actual people skills and learning how to deal with people in groups and deal with your management and being able to implement very vague instructions. Those are the things that you really only learn when you're actually working. And I think that college isn't for everyone. And I think that you can easily learn those skills, but we really need to focus on ensuring that we have a livable wage for all, despite your education level. Because I think that is another massive driver in this kind of push, go to college because that's what's going to get you out of poverty. Well, those people who don't go to college shouldn't be in poverty anyways.
No, kids are being sold multiple untrue stories about their education, one of which is if you get a degree, you're going to be successful financially, which is grossly not true. But they're also being told that you need a degree in order to do anything of use with your life or anything that's, respectable or impressive. Your point earlier about like service, like handyman jobs and like doing actual, physical labor, which actually makes more money. It's still so looked down upon, which is slowly changing. But, we're telling kids that they have to go into school in order to be successful. And that's not true. There are many paths to having a successful career, but also just very quickly, the education component of what college is supposed to be is very important, but college doesn't have a monopoly on that either. Like educating yourself, gaining knowledge, pursuing the grand quest of understanding what it means to be a human and how you fit into the scope of what it means to be a human and how that affects how you actually live in your day-to-day life. That is infinitely important, but you can also access all of that for free. Like you can access MIT and Harvard and Yale's course library for free on the internet. Like that's clearly not the thing that they're selling you because they're giving it away. Right. They're selling you the degree, which you don't actually need to land a job. And that's dramatically overpriced.
And I want to grab some more comments.
That takes us back to the activism part, though, right? Because this is supposed to be really, if you're not getting it through K through 12, the first time that you start critically thinking, where you're really starting to think about your position in the world and how the system impacts you. And all the things that we've talked about today, I'm pissed and they become pissed and they should be pissed and they should get out in the streets and they should revolutionize everything. And that's what we're seeing.
And they should vote third party, damn it. So yes. Vote third party.
We should, yes. Everyone should vote third party.
Yes, absolutely. I was on one show one day, and a guy told me he said, "Larry, you once said you would vote for Cornel West if he was the only third party on your ticket, and you're a libertarian." I said, "Yes." Like, you don't agree with half of the stuff he says. I know, but I still rather have third party than the two guys who are just bombing people and killing people and don't care. I'd rather have Cornel West. If I have a choice, I'd rather go there. I'll take third party, even though I disagree with a lot of his policies. I would still do it anyway. So 100% yes, Charles right. And what she means is vote third party no matter what. That's what she meant to say. So before
and that
I go on,
is radical because we've never seen that.
There we go. Before we go on to some more comments, I want to tell us what you are doing and how we can get a hold of you. Dr. Danny Shaw, please tell us, what are you doing and how can we buy your book? What can we do?
Well, I love Charla's point about the lack of passports in our hands. I hope more of us can see the world, experience the world, and going to Cancun for a week with Mexicans waiting on you. I always tell my students that doesn't count as true international travel because even if passports have gone up statistically, most of our people, whether it's my cousins or students, maybe they're just going to the Dominican Republic for a little vacation. That doesn't count. In terms of the Ivy League, it's not even about the education. Why do people send their children there? It's the networking. It's the networking 100%. Of the richest and most powerful families. And if you're poor and you can slip up in there, that's a Citibank internship, etc. My latest book, I think the title speaks for itself.
This is the G word.
Yes, this is the G word, exclamation point. I've been following through my scholarship and research, and amazing that Charla actually lived over there in Palestine. I've been an anti-Zionist scholar for 3 decades now. So since October 7th, it's changed my life. I think it's been a cleavage, a historical cleavage. I think the world will never be the same for many different reasons. I say bravo to these Columbia students. They were given a deadline today at 2 p.m. As long as you get off this lawn, as long as you stop this encampment, we can go back to normal. You can get your degrees. You can graduate. They said no overwhelmingly. That's why I win as a Columbia alumni. I couldn't be more proud of them. And it's just amazing. No matter how much we say this is about a G side, this is about love, this is about peace. Everything in the media, you're anti-Semitic. I think the U.S. population is beginning to catch on. They sent a lot of provocateurs into the crowd as well to try to make us look bad in Boston and across the country. So, yeah, just delightful to learn from you all. I had no idea. I didn't have time to do any research. I thought it was going to be like some Zionist club attacking me, and I was just ready because that's what happens a lot on these different shows. Then I hear from Hannah and Larry and Charla, and I'm like, well, I'm right at home. I actually fit in here. So
it's all good. It's all good. Yes, absolutely. Just for everybody who wants to get Danny Shaw's books, please, his link tree is in the description in YouTube and also on Facebook. Click his link tree. Check him out. So awesome. Hannah, tell us what you're doing. If you got to go, Danny, go ahead and take off. If you got to run.
All right. We'll be in touch. Thanks.
All righty.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Hannah, tell us about what you're doing.
I spend a lot of time on Twitter. So you can find me there. I am writing extensively. I mentioned the marketing agency. That's kind of my day job, but my primary project is helping families find alternatives to the public school system. So if you're looking to get your kids out, or if you're, on the education path yourself and you're trying to figure out, should I go to college? Should I pursue higher education farther in my career? Should I, what options are available to me for both my own education and the raising of my kids? I talk about that extensively. I also host a podcast. It's just my name, the Hannah Frankman Podcast. I figure that's what people are Googling anyway, where I talk to people every week who are building alternative schools, homeschooling their kids, had unusual education experiences themselves, are investors who are backing education projects. So if this is an area of interest to you, can check that out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find your podcast. And again, Twitter is kind of like the hub for everything that I'm doing. I'm on Instagram too, if you're not a Twitter person. But my social medias are kind of the hub for everything else. So that's the best place to find me.
There we go. Sounds good. Charlotte, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah. So, you know me, I, helping people find housing. Obviously, here in Michigan, there's actually some zoning proposal changes here in Lansing and at the state level that's going to make what we do kind of impossible. They're regulating shared housing in a way that's going to make it not cost effective for us or for our guests. So that's something that we're kind of battling with and thinking about how we're going to pivot or push back. But it seems like it's in the works. I still
what about
have
your book? There we go.
Drugs. So, you can get that on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, a couple other places. I'm writing a book right now about public housing in the United States. I'm an ethnographer for my I'm an ethnographer, but that has nothing to do with what I do scientifically. And, just working in international development, trying to do it ethically and focused on localization. And staying off social media with the side.
The ethic part, that's the hard part.
It is very, very difficult.
That's the hard part.
Very, very
Raising
difficult.
money, that's hard. Absolutely. I got to do an odd super chat. I'm not sure where this comes from. I mean, where it's coming from. Snork Y2K says, thank you for $2. I did not pay my wife's last $300 after she died. I'm sorry she died. That sucks. But it is kind of cool you gave it to the man at the end. I mean, that's kind of a cool way of giving him a punch at the end. But I'm sorry that your wife passed. That sucks, man. I'm sorry about that.
If I pay my minimum payments every month for the next 40 years, it still will not touch my original loan base. Yes. So I just plan on paying those minimum payments unless I get that PLSF. But it sounds like to me, even with the changes that they're making with Biden's administration, it's still extremely difficult to get your loans forgiven. Even if you work in public service. So just don't bet on that. If you're going to go to college, make sure that you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to go ahead and work in public service and my debt's going to get forgiven, because that never worked. All through Bush, all through Obama, all through Trump, none of them forgave anybody. So just so you know, don't hedge your bets on that one.
There we go. So we have a lot of interesting comments. Snork also says, I have one student with a PhD in history going for an associate's degree in electronics. Massive change in career, huh? Think about that. You got a PhD and you're like, you know what? Nah, I'm going to go, fix radios and stuff. Or computers, I guess. Whatever you fix electronics and whatever that is. So, yeah, really, really an interesting way of thinking.
Well, one ironically has a much higher salary potential than the other, and it's not the one that was expensive to get credentialed in.
Yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely. Christine says, I went to massage school in 2015 and I'm making above average living. Good for you. That's amazing. You got to find what you're passionate about. Christine, it's funny. There's two parts. I got to be two parts of this, though. People often say you got to find your passion. Agreed. However, you also got to be good at it. And what I mean, yes, I'm serious. Because my passion is I want to be a dancer. I'm in trouble, right? My passion is I'm going to be a professional basketball player. I'm in trouble, right? I'm too old to be a dancer or be a basketball player. That's not going to work for me. I got to find something I'm passionate about and I'm good at. So luckily, you're also good at it, Christine. I just want to make sure that's also clear. You want to also be good at it. That's all.
Yeah. I started school as a fashion design major and quickly realized that everyone was much better than me in the room and got the hell out of there.
There we
still
go.
My passion. I still sew. I still do art. It's just not something that I expect people to buy.
There we go. Absolutely. We can just hang out and look at your cool fashion. Nice. See,
yeah,
that's great.
I think I have a great sense of fashion.
There we go. There we go. Oh, good.
I gotta get going, Larry.
Yes. So, guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming out. Charla, it's been amazing having you back. It's been like 35 years. So I'm very happy that you are back in my world again. Thank you for coming back. I do appreciate that. So, and some of the people remembered you. So that was kind of nice too. You were not forgotten.
Well, I hope they all missed me.
Yes. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. I know you, I interviewed at Freedom Fest and now you're actually on my show. So it's good. So that's awesome too. I'm happy. Guys, please hit that like button. It does matter. If you're watching on Twitter, retweet this thing. It is important. But lastly, once this is over, do me a favor, go back to what you were watching this on, whatever you were watching on, and leave a comment. If you leave a comment after it's over, you know who likes that? Al Gore Rhythm. He likes it a lot. So do that, and then we'll be able to move everything forward. Guys, we'll say thank you so much for today. I will be on my radio show tomorrow, 1 p.m. radio show. Call in if you want to, WYSL. I will see you all very soon.